This is TechDays.
Okay, welcome to this session. It's about ransomware. We're going to talk a little bit about experiences from the field in investigating ransomware, what is going on out there, and also in the end talk a little bit about what you can do about it. So just out of curiosity, how many of you guys know that your organization has had at least one incident of ransomware ever? Raise your hands. Look around. It's pretty scary. And that's one of the interesting things about ransomware is the fact that statistically, if you had ransomware once, then you probably had 2 targeted attacks that wasn't ransomware. So statistically, everyone here had a real target attack too, but you can't necessarily see them. Food for thought, right? So, the entertainers of today is Hasain the Wolf Alshakarti and myself, Marcus Murray. We work with a company called Truesec, and in our everyday life, we do investigations and we do penetration testing and stuff. So this is what we really do and what we are kind of interested in, not only from 9 to 5, but this is more of a lifestyle to us.
Yeah.
I used to think, anyway. Now I'm getting old, so I have to spend a little bit of time with my kids too, but not too much. That was supposed to be funny, by the way. So, thank you. So we're going to start off with something that relates, even though you may not think so. It's also nice to watch some movies in this darkness. So,
you know, we've been hearing a lot about cybersecurity lately, largely because of what happened to Sony. Companies and individuals are more concerned about the safety and privacy of their information than ever. President Obama has unveiled a number of new proposals this week to crack down on hackers, and he plans to address this in the State of the Union speech on Tuesday. And it's great that the government is working on this, but the truth of the matter is we need to do a better job of protecting ourselves. You know, the most popular password in the United States is password 123. And as long as that's the case, we're vulnerable. So today we sent a camera out on the Hollywood Boulevard to help people by asking them to tell us their password. And this is how that went.
We're talking about cybersecurity today and how safe people's passwords are. What is one of your online passwords currently?
It is my dog's name and the year I graduated from high school.
Oh, what kind of dog do you have?
I have a Chihuahua Papillon.
And what's its name?
Jameson.
Jameson. And where'd you go to school?
I went to school back in Greensburg, Pennsylvania.
What school?
Hempfield Area Senior High School.
Oh, when did you graduate?
In 2009.
Oh, great.
It's like my cat's name and then just like a random number.
Okay. Have you had this cat for a while?
Yeah, she's my childhood pet.
Aw. And what's her name?
Her name is Jolie.
Jolie. So like a password of yours would be Jolie and then a number.
Yeah.
Like number 1?
Like my birthday.
Oh, when is your birthday?
June 12th.
Oh, nice. And what year were you born?
95.
Oh, great. So Jolie, 6, 12, 95.
Yes.
Got it.
So you mean to give my password right now? No, I cannot do that.
But we all want to know what it is so we can tell you if it's strong or not.
Oh my goodness. Let me think. Okay, one is Tel Aviv. Yeah. 468, and then Israel. It's only 3, but it's, you know, it's for me it's strong enough.
Ireland, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Gemma, 1, 2, 3. Spelled G-E-M-M-A.
Well, most of them are Italian.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah,
like
so
what? Like what's a good Italian password?
My grandma's name.
What's your grandma's name?
Maria.
Maria. So Maria is your password?
Oh yeah, now you know my password. Oh yeah.
That was tough.
How does a password relate to anything? Well, one of the big ransomware attacks we investigated this year started with 1 weak password. An entire community was brought down, initially because of 1 weak password. So we're going to go through that thing. I'm just going to talk a little bit more about passwords before that. You can guess password in different ways. You can password spray, as we call it nowadays. It used to be called password brute forcing. But another very common technique today is actually phishing for passwords. So I want to give you a small demo with a sign where we'll show you a sample of a phishing page, what they look like today when you receive an email. Take it away.
Yeah, so this is just a sample email, just composing an email. It says somebody shared a file with you. Probably most of you has received these emails nowadays. And then if you just click the link to go to that file sharing site, it will prompt you for an authentication. Maybe it shouldn't. It used to be like a verification code sent to you. Please input that one. But if it prompts you for an authentication, then obviously some users will just go ahead and use whatever they type in.
How many of you guys are sure this is not a Microsoft site? You guys raising your hands, I'm sorry, but I was a bit tough on you. This is Azure. This is a Microsoft site. I had to, I'm sorry. It's kind of hard to see the difference, that's my point. Yeah.
So just go ahead, type in the username. It looks and feels like this is the authentic thing, this is the real thing, and then maybe sending me to my ADFS server. Of course, the attacker will do proper reconnaissance. They will see, okay, what's behind the scenes for this company? So do they use Federation or not? So we just keep going and type in our sign-in credentials. Hopefully, we will end back in the real thing. Now, this is the real thing, if you didn't notice that already. So because of single sign-on, the user will actually be let in at this stage, and they will notice that they were actually phished with their passwords. So if we just go back to our backend server and just look at the files we got a new file. This was created now. So if we just list the content of these files, that will be actually the, let me see. The type of the credential they typed in, whether that was user1 corp local or the test account or anything. So this can be just ongoing and then waiting for users to type in their credentials and presenting them for the attacker.
Interesting fact is, it is more and more difficult to send emails with attachment with malware. So it is turning into malware-less attacks on emails. So this is a typical one with credential harvesting. Then you try to use the credentials for something afterwards. So when we do this in red team exercises in our company, we have a 75% hit rate when we send an email with content like this. People will give their credentials away. So, and all it takes is one credential, usually. So that's pretty interesting. So we feel this is important to share. If we go back to the case at hand, it is a really asymmetric threat. In this case, it was the account student 1, 01 actually, that brought down an entire community. That looks like a community to me. So another example, just before we start that, is Deloitte. Just to give you an insight in the fact that you could be vulnerable too. I'm not saying Deloitte has bad security. I'm honestly not. The year 2012, they were rated the #1 cybersecurity firm in the world. So I think they are just a good example. 1.5 years ago, they had an intrusion. Someone guessed the password of the global admin for Office 365. So all their emails were stolen of all the 244,000 employees. And imagine their customers. They cater basically every big Fortune 500 company and other companies all around the globe. It was all taken. And it was due to one password. That's the asymmetry in that. The story doesn't say if they harvested it using phishing or if it was just brute forcing. So back to the community. We're going to give you an example of one of the investigations. It is a pretty interesting example because it was actually the investigation of an Indian tribe in the US. So Indianer for the guys who doesn't speak English that well, who pretends to understand what I'm saying. So, but it's kind of interesting. In the US, the Indian tribes, they got something back from the government after the mistreatment that happened a long time ago. So they have their own, it's almost like a state inside of the country. They actually have their own schools. They have their own health services and hospitals. They even have their own police. So this is the tribal police in that group. Problem is, one morning, nothing seemed to work. In the hospitals, in the police station, everywhere, when they came in, they had ransomware on the screens. And this is ransomware. This is what they saw. They're actually kind of nice. Sorry for the files. I mean, they're kind of polite. This ransomware is called SamSam. And it's not yet known if this is a one hacker campaign or if this is like a nation state campaign. No one really knows yet. They're not caught. So that's pretty interesting. And they have been very successful. So far, they have taken in more than $6 million in cash in Bitcoin. And we still don't know if it is one person. What they have done, though, is that they have created damage for hundreds and hundreds of million dollars, including this tribe. So you have an opportunity when you get hit by this. You can either pay. In this case, it was 0.7 Bitcoin, which translates into a few thousand Swedish to 3 Bitcoins, which translate into a few thousand dollars. Actually, 5,000-6,000 dollars, depending on the rate. It's going down right now. It's so fluctuant, you can't really say. You have to check every time you're going to translate this into the real money. Yeah. So anyway, I think this is a cool tribe because they said directly, we don't negotiate with terrorists. We're not going to pay. They could pay some money and get rid of this problem, but they didn't. They actually filed this to the FBI, and we did the investigation, actually together with the FBI in a sense. So I'm going to explain this attack and do some learnings from that, which is interesting and valuable. Pocagon had an RDP server facing the internet. You may think that that's a big arrow, by the way. Damn. It didn't look like an arrow. No, it kind of looks like an arrow. Well,
that's an attack.
Yeah. So in this case, it was password spraying. They guessed the password of an account called Student01. That was just there. It was just a regular user. It was not an admin. But it had an RDP exposure to the internet. We're going to give you some statistics on RDP exposures later. And the interesting thing about this is most of the ransomware attacks, like a year or two ago, they were always automated, like WannaCry. Someone started it somewhere, but then it just automatically spread. This is a man-controlled attack. Someone actually actively, manually, password sprayed the RDP, and then he did different things. He had password extraction or credit extraction. He could take away credentials from this computer and try to reuse them on other system. Or he used something called the Eternal Blue. And it's kind of interesting, the story about Eternal Blue. They had an exploit. This was not even a 0-day. So this is an exploit that was it was developed by the NSA, the agency in the US. And they had a toolkit of 0 days that they could use if they had to exploit some adversary. This is natural. Every nation state has this. Even many of the big security firms like ours. We have 0 days in store that we could use in case of we need them for anything. So the problem is that this whole toolbox was distributed among a lot of agents who used them. One of them got compromised by a team called shadow brokers. So the shadow brokers, they told the NSA, if you don't pay money, then we're going to give them to someone else. And then they actually held an auction. The problem is no one paid for it, so they kind of released it on the internet. But Eternal Blue is the most popular, still today, malware used in ransomware attacks to spread. And still today, it's pretty functional. Even for this organization right here. So we believe they used Eternal Blue to hack into some of the other computers, and then from there they took credentials until they got the domain admin, and then they compromised the entire domain, and then they started the encryption. It's kind of sneaky, huh? So you don't see anything coming until everything is encrypted. So this is a new trend. We see more and more of it. Can you imagine how many smiling faces in that Indian tribe that particular day? Not so much, to be honest. They have targeted other cities in the US. Some has been out of, even the police had to go back to pen and paper, couldn't even work with computers anymore. Hospitals that actually paid ransom because they had to, because they couldn't allow for people to die. So there were no discussion. Paying was the only option. You couldn't negotiate with terrorist philosophy, it wouldn't have worked there. You had to pay. That is why they have $6 million in the Bitcoin wallets sent by these attacks to this particular guy or team.
And many of the transaction systems they had, they had to be rolled back to 2 months before the attack occurred, simply because they didn't have enough backups in some cases. So that was the worst case. 2 months before that occurred, they had to just roll back all transactions and start from there again.
Yeah, they lost months of work. It's interesting with the Pokagon. I think they actually say Pokagon or something, but I'm going to say Pokagon anyway, 'cause that's the best I can do. But they actually had a pen test not so long before this incident. The pen test showed no vulnerabilities. That only tells me one thing. There is a difference between a pen test and a pen test. One thing is, of course, who you hire to do the pen test for you. Another is the scoping. But they believed they didn't have any vulnerabilities. Our infrastructure team were actually helping the IT in that environment before this incident. So when they did some things in terms of deployment solutions for them, the famous Johan Arvidmark and those guys, Marcus Lassvolk, they asked 2 guys from our team, the security team at Truesec, to do a small Active Directory cyber review. So we did 2 days review where we saw simple things like they had too many domain admins compared to what the size of the organization. They had password never expires. They had weak password policies, 6 characters, non-complex. They had a lot of accounts that they didn't use, but they were still active. You could see that no one has logged on for a year or so. So they knew about this. But there was the normal problems. The recommendation was, of course, increase the password complexity and longer the passwords. They didn't want to do that. That was too inconvenient, especially for the higher people of the community, older and more important. So I think this is good food for thought. Then you can think again, RDP on the internet, is that still around, honestly? How many of you guys do RDP on the internet? You're smart. In Norway, everyone is honest. They're just going to raise their hand. Here, everybody's going, no, not me. Don't look at me. No, no. Well, you can make an easy test. I mean, how hard is it to find some service on the internet? Skip verification. I just Googled a little bit this morning, actually. It is so easy to find. This was just an example to find RDP files on the internet, pre-configured connection files to RDP servers. I'm not going to show you password spraying and brute forcing on a server, I don't know, in front of this many witnesses. But if you do a quick search, this is just one example out of an immense amount of examples you could do, like file type RDP with just some of the variables inside desktop width. It will give me a couple of 100 RDP servers. You can just download the RDP connection files from these sites and then connect. So this RDP connection. This is just one out of so many ways of searching for RDP files. They actually store them on the net. I actually found a very few that had passwords in them. Very convenient. They put the password content on the internet. That makes it very, very easy. But some other things to think about is it's not impossible to brute force RDP. It is a little bit slower than everything else when it comes to brute forcing because it will actually be some kind of resemblance with running a macro. You kind of pretend to do keystrokes. But there are tools for that. This is Hydra, a very old tool that's been around forever. You can download it free off the internet. It's from a German group called The Hacker's Choice. And they can brute force all these protocols, by the way. Cisco, FTP, Oracle, Oracle is unbreakable. You can brute force it still. It's pretty funny. MS SQL, RDP, etc., etc. So, and this is without the big patch. This is just the default. So, some statistics. A security company called Rapid7, they sell products. They did a quick scan of the internet. They found 11 million open ports on 3389. We all know that you can change ports, so there may be more. This was not the entire internet either, it was just a big scope. Out of the 11 million, 4.1 responded and showed to be RDPs on the internet. So that's 4 million. An interesting thing to think about is now we're moving to the cloud. When we have things in Azure or Amazon, you use RDP. It is like the normal way of doing administration. So think about how you expose that as we move more and more into the cloud. It is okay to expose RDP if you do it correctly. So no one can brute force it, password spray, steal your credentials. If you have MFA, for example, it will be better. Another thing about the MFA in Azure, do you know the statistics? How many use multi-factor authentication in Azure as admins? Do you know, Hasain?
Well, I can guess.
Give me a guess. Give me your best guess.
Let's see, something less than 2%?
1.7?
1.7?
Ish.
That sounds decent, right?
And last year it was ish, you could guess?
0.7 or 6?
65?
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe. Well,
it's
it
horrible.
Is a very small percentage actually using secure logon to their onboarded cloud efforts, even by corporations today. So that's a good take home. We're going to move along. We talked a little about, in this attack, you could see this picture where you moved from the RDP server and into the environment. I'm going to let Hasain show some demo of typical lateral movement used by the credential part of things. Running Eternal Blue is more boring because you just click the bottom and it will just connect. So credential harvesting is actually a more nice demo for you to understand.
So we're just going to go through a classic one. So start harvesting and looking. We have already the first footstep into that domain. Somebody clicked something or we collected a logon somewhere and connected to a server. So we already have a session established. There is a user or a session been established by an agent.
This could be the RDP server, just
exactly. And this user logged in here is not local admin on that machine. It's just a regular user. So we will start looking towards the Active Directory systems and see what we can find. There are a lot of different sets or tools available for doing enumeration. This is just a sample. You can use the off-the-shelf type of tools like the PowerView, for instance. These are, by the way, most of them are feeding of the LAN type of tools. So we're using PowerShell to do these type of activities. And then besides that, we will be actually doing in-memory only type of access. So what will be doing here, I'm just hosting that PowerView. In this case, this is the standard PowerView. It could be obfuscated as well. I'm just putting it on a web server I control. So I can be downloading it directly to the client, to that victim, executing in memory. I just do inline execution and it will get available. So this is not touching disk. It will not be visible if you look at the disk on that machine. It will be just running in memory. So I'm just loading it. I got back my prompt. And I can start doing all sorts of different enumeration of my domain. Their domain. I'm
it's not your yet.
Well, it's good to have a vision and a goal, right?
Yeah, you've always been very goal-oriented.
So obviously, we are in corp.local. There is these domain controllers. In this case, this is a limited demo environment. So DC01 is obviously our high-value target in this case. And then there should be some domain admins being there. So we can, of course, as a regular user, enumerate all users in the domain. We can get hold of all the computers. We can get hold of all the groups in the domain and figure out who's what kind of roles they have. So this is all available for just a standard user, right? So let's see if I just collect all these things, just run them one at a time. We don't really have command history recall or things like that in our fancy agent. It's a little bit bare bone.
Yeah, it's funny with this enumeration. We did another investigation in Sweden not too long ago. They only encrypted one server in the entire organization, but they took the most important database server. So they manually went into Active Directory, enumerated the entire thing, and they found out that's the database server to use. It was hosting the one application that they sold to customers, and encrypted that one. And then they sent the message about how much they should pay.
So just to see who are members of the domain admin group, I just collected all the information about users, computers, and groups, full information, so I can see membership across these different entities. And then I figure out there is an admin one, there is a G-admin account in that Active Directory who are domain admins. You can enumerate all other groups as well, and just to figure out who are the important user accounts to target on or focus on. This is, by the way, the agent we're running is PowerShell, so it is a native PowerShell shell we're getting here, so we just can execute any PowerShell statements as we go.
Yeah. We call it living off the land. We try not to install tools where we can use the built-in tools into the systems. It'll be much more difficult for malware detection then.
Yeah. So another popular source of information that can include what we call juicy information is group policies. Especially if we get the feeling that there should be group policy preferences settings. This is just an example, once again. So I will just download and execute another set of PowerShell functions. This is for enumerating group policy preferences. There we go. Once again, I'm hosting that on my own server, and then once it's loaded in memory, I can just go enumerate that domain for, group policy preference settings.
So this is a feature of group policies in Active Directory that is obsolete. You could actually store credentials in Active Directory in order for things to run, scripts and so forth. The big problem is that when we do our red teams and pen tests, in more than 50% of the cases, we still find these today. So no one knows they have them, but they have stored username password combinations in group policies.
So if you've had these type of things, scheduled tasks or services accounts or something deployed through group policy preferences once upon a time, even though you upgraded your domain to the latest and greatest and this feature is not supported anymore, these things will still be there. They will not be wiped out. And that's, in most of the cases, the group policy object is not even enabled. It's just there. It's been there for historical reasons, and then we collect that information from it.
And this is the typical difference between a manual-driven ransomware and an automated. I mean, you could automate this too, but when there is a real hacker behind the wheel, he will find this stuff.
So we got the password presented here. The password is that one, fairly complex password.
This is a complex password.
Yeah. And then the rest of the details will be going in that file. Let's see if we can access the file. Hopefully. No. Oh, sorry. It's my fault.
Well, if you can't do it, I don't know who to call.
We need to escape some of the characters in there, so just make another copy, fresh copy of it. Oops. No tabbing.
You can
so there we go.
Do that. Yeah.
So this is the actual password stored. It's encrypted, but it's not a secret how to decrypt that password, if we put it that way. If you know the schema, you can just decrypt it because this is available for all domain members. And then there could be other type pieces of information that can reveal some more hints about where this password is applicable. Obviously, this is a data source, so SQL Server is this is for accessing a database or something. Could be on host SRv02 or SRv2. So all that kind of information is useful for our further activities. So if we take it from there, we now have at least a user account and a password related to that user account. So that combination is now in our hand. And then we can go ahead and use that SVC12 user account with the clear text password we just collected.
So this is a typical lateral movement from just having the RDP server into finding things by querying Active Directory, retrieving passwords from Active Directory, so that we can connect to other servers on the internal network. That's the idea. So this is lateral movement.
So I will be running all these commands all together. So preparing a username variable, the password we just got from there, and then preparing a credential object. This is just plain PowerShell, nothing strange. And I will use WMI as a lateral movement tooling. So WMI remote execution is possible if you have admin credentials or admin privs on a machine. We hope for that. This is just type of a guessing activity. So we preload with the credentials. So let's go ahead and do that. There we go. We should have our variables ready for that. And then we just run the invoke WMI method. No tabbing again.
Don't you want to punch that in manually instead?
Of course not. So if you're wondering about that PowerShell command line, it's as simple as that. We use encoded commands. This is just base64 encoding, just to skip all the headache with escaping special characters, hyphens, brackets, etc. As a matter of fact, now we are admin on SRv2. That's what it shows us. We got a new session established in SRv2. What we did with that PowerShell command, we injected our agent on that SRv2 server. So we got a PowerShell agent running on that server now.
So now this SQL2 is phoning home to our CC server, command and control server on the internet. So we can control this one remotely directly if we want to.
So I will just jump back to my command and control server. I have two different sessions. It's session number 2, the latest one. The thing you see there, connection coming from the local host, this is just an artifact because we're using proxying in a different number of steps. So actually the connections on our CC server are originating from the local proxy we're running. So this is all going through an HTTP channel where the actual commands and responses been sent forth and back are carried in cookies. We will get back to this and show you the exact cookies we're using. So
Hasain has one session to the RDP server and one session to the SQL server now.
So I want to get interactive with the session number 2. I'm just jumping into that session.
We're using Metasploit for demo as the CC server. This is a free-to-use tool set. In the SamSam attack, they actually used something called double pulsar. That's also one of the NSA tools. So they actually had a toolkit, again, exposed on the internet, developed by the NSA. That's pretty nice, high-quality stuff.
So obviously, yes, we are logged in as SVC12 on that server. Obviously, we are local admins on that machine. We don't have any fancy domain group here. We're not domain admin yet. But let's go ahead and see what we can do with this. We still have several opportunities to check. So this is our first step in the lateral movement. We just stepped into some other machine where we actually are local admin all of a sudden. So let's just go ahead and start extracting some local artifacts that can help us get further into that. So the thing we will be looking at local user accounts. If we want to investigate whether there are identity dependencies between local server account, local admin accounts, between this server and other servers in the environment, we should look for that. So what I'm going to do is actually just save the registry hives. I'm a local admin, so I can perfectly do that. So just making a copy of the registry hives, in this case, the system registry hive, and then the security registry hive.
Yeah, the local password store database.
There we go. So just having a copy of these files. And of course, I do have a web server or a server where I can upload these 2 files to continue my investigation. I don't want to download all kind of fancy tools yet to these servers just to avoid detection. I don't want to be that noisy. So I will better upload these files to my server and then start looking at them on my own systems.
And it's pretty typical. He's uploading things to Azure. So it doesn't necessarily look too bad. It's not a server in Russia or China or somewhere that could be suspicious.
And then finally, on my server, I got some of these tools that can go and dig for that local information I'm looking for. So I got the files uploaded. That's the system hive and the registry hive I just uploaded. So if I just execute the secret dump, it's a Python script to dump local user account together with their credentials from registry files. So we got a local account called gadmin. That's the built-in admin account, by the way, if you observe the RID 500. So we can start elaborating on whether this is admin or there is a shared password scenario between this local admin account and other local admin accounts on other servers.
Yeah, so this is the next step in lateral movement. What if there is a dependency so that this SQL server holds the same local admin account and password as others? So the next step would be to test that and see if we can connect. And normally, ransomware would have this built in automatically. So it would just try and try and try over the network.
So in this particular case, just show you another PowerShell-based attack tool. I think many of you in the audience here knows about Mimikatz, right? It's a well-known tool to collect credentials, reuse credentials in the Windows platform. We'll be using a version of that is PowerShell-based. So we download it, run it in memory, and it's get available with all its functionality. So let's just do that on that machine. My target here is I want to use Mimikatz to perform something called pass the hash. I got that local user account information. I don't have the clear text password, so I cannot just use it right away. I got the hash, so I can use that right away by doing pass the hash. So just loaded the Mimikatz, and then just go ahead and do pass the hash. We just preloaded the hashes here. It should be the same hash. Let me just double check. It ends with 4233. Yeah. So we'll just execute the Mimikatz in this case. Of course, it is possible to execute other tools if you want to. If you have your own version of whatever tool that can give you the pass the hash capability. And then with the pass the hash, we're running another command. So we're preloading the credentials and we're running PowerShell. And once again, it's exactly the same PowerShell. So this will be loading the PowerShell agent on that target server we want to get to. So we just get command shell, another shell open. In this case now, we're just loading another PowerShell instance on our server we are at right now. But the difference is that this is a local admin account.
Yeah, so from the SQL server, we now jump to another server and started a new session, session 3.
So
So this way we do lateral movement and we compromise more and more servers in this environment.
So -I and session number 3. Now I'm in the context of that gadmin account. And once there, I will start looking for expanding influences towards other systems with that account. Let's see, session is loaded. Just to make sure that we are that user.
You are the computer account.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So there isn't, Mimikatz is, or pass the hash is a little bit weird because you actually loaded that account credentials, but you still the original user who launched the PowerShell session. So yes, there is something, although who am I tells I'm still that original user. Let's go ahead and see what we can do here. So I will go ahead and just preload PowerView again. I want to use another function to do something similar to the password spraying. I will check my access to other systems. And then in this case, we already enumerated the servers in the domain and the clients. So we make an exception for SRv2, which where we're running everything at, and just compile an array with other computer names. And I want just to invoke check local admin access function.
So now we're basically connecting to every system with this password to see if it works, one by one by one. So try this, try this, try this.
So we got a positive response on SRv3. That's nice. We're not local admin with the gAdmin account on any of the servers, any of the other computers, except for SRv3. So that's our next step in the lateral movement. So let's just make sure to move there. And then once again, we do remote code execution, jumping there. We use the same method if we want to, or if we believe that we need to use anything else, then it doesn't really matter at this time. So what we'll be using, once again, WMI, remote execution, and spawning another agent on SRv3. So we have a session number 4 open now on our command and control server.
So you see, step by step, computer after computer, they're all falling because of dependencies.
So I'm jumping into session number 4. This should now be on SRv3, where we jumped, with the gAdmin, with the local admin account. Oops. Sorry. So to proceed from there, we will be looking for other type of artifacts that could be found locally on a server. So we will start looking for extracting local LSA secrets or LSA kept credentials. So I will just preload another set of PowerShell functions. There we go. So this is actually giving me if there are any current sessions loaded on this system. Let's just go back to the bottom of it. There we go. So this is a classic dumping current sessions with all these anti-hashes, etc. There is actually a gAdmin that was logged in on this. It's a gAdmin, the domain admin. This looks promising, but that session was not active anymore. So this is a previous session that was terminated. So let's look at it from a different perspective. Let's dump all the registry hives once again, and then work with that one. So we don't have any powerful admin account logged in currently on the system. So we look for other artifacts that could be there.
Yeah, while Hasain finishes this attack, just to show you that he can get domain admin this way, one thing that we see in these investigations is that many times you don't even have to do all these steps. So many times when we go on one computer, we find scripts and things that holds clear text username and passwords that are used by admins for convenience. Because sometimes these kind of threat actors are not that sophisticated. They'll actually look through your desktop, through your home folders, through everywhere if you're an admin dude, or on servers that are used by admins, jump stations and so forth. So it is amazing in the investigations how many times they don't even have to do these more advanced steps as they get further in to get domain admin. So that's something to think about, how to clean that up.
So I've just uploaded all these files. I just named them with SRv3, and I will go back to the secret dump tool to dump all the local secrets that can be found there. I got the files on my file share, so let's go ahead and run that. And then this is extracting the local admin accounts. This is extracting cache domain credentials, offline cache domain credentials, which are not so very useful. But the most important thing I see, there is a service account appearing there. So there is a service with a custom service account configured, and obviously there is a password for that service account. So that's the clear text password for a service account called SVC13. And that's most probably a domain account.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next step from there will be, okay, let's do this again and try to figure out whether we are admin somewhere now with that credential. So once again, just do the go to and visit every machine and try the new set of credentials you just received from the previous step. So we just preloading, just using the classic netuse command with the preloaded clear text password. We don't need to do any fancy pass the hash or anything like that. And then somewhere, if we are admin on any machine with that credential, we will get a successful connection. So that's DC01. It says command completed successfully. We're enumerating for admin $share. This is, you got to be domain admin to get that on a domain controller. So then that's what we call domain domination accomplished.
Domain domination. Goal-oriented domain domination.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Hasain. So, I mean, this is a typical step. So in this case, after they have domain compromise, this is when they do the encryption. And that's the problem today, because they're getting more sophisticated. So that was my point. So just so that you know, this SAM attack, they don't only use RDP to get into the network. Another example that they have used is JBoss vulnerabilities, for example. And Cisco Talos, they found like millions of exposed, or sorry, thousands of exposed servers that were already compromised, and millions that have the JBoss vulnerability in the world. So 1,600 that was already attacked by malware in one investigation. So that's something to think about. Because today the difference is that you will not just have a crypto miner trying to get money. They can actually compromise the entire network and encrypt everything. So that's a new angle that you need to understand. I have a small video of how to do this, but I'm going to skip that from time constraints. But it's just, all I want to do is show you that there are tools out there to automate this. Yeah, you don't have to have the sound that loud. I know it's disco time, but let's wait till later tonight. But I just want to show you that this tool has all these functionalities using Java deserialization vulnerabilities and things. So you can basically download this tool for free. It's actually on GitHub, and then you can just run it. So Jenkins vulnerabilities, Java vulnerabilities, and then your automatic scan mode. So you can just scan for vulnerable servers, just feed it with IP addresses. So I think you need to understand that you don't need to be so sophisticated to do this kind of attack. This tool is called JexBoss. So you should worry about these things. But the problem is now that ransomware makers are putting all this stuff together to make complex malware. So some lesson learned from the Pokagon incident. They knew that they had vulnerabilities. It would have been fairly easy to mitigate at least the ones used in this attack. Maybe not everything they have. Another thing to understand is it was a very costly process. An average real investigation like this goes for around $2-3 million US. That's not just the incident responders and people, it's all the restoring, all the lost production. It turns into millions of dollars if you're a big enough company or organization.
In this particular case, they had to redeploy all client computers, F12, just from scratch. They had to redeploy every single server. In those cases, they had backup copies. It was a manual restore process for the backup copies, including the domain controllers. We actually had to bring an old domain controller snapshot copy to live and work from it because we didn't have any other trusted domain controller to work with. So the whole process took a little bit more than 2 weeks to restore the complete environment. And then a lot of people involved. Their IT department, our people, and other people were involved.
Yeah. And you think that's bad? I'm going to give you another example, just to cheer you up a little bit, because you all seem so happy. So I just want to give you a story. It's another example about ransomware. You know, in Ukraine, there's a small family-run Ukrainian software business called Linkos Group. They have a 4-story building where they develop different kinds of softwares. You can actually see them down in the bottom. How many of you guys know about this organization? You work in security, right? Yeah. No? You're just smart. Yes, you are. You're humble too. Good. Okay, you Google it. So anyhow, well, it's not very known to us, but it is pretty known in Ukraine. So even though this is run by a small family company, it has the go-to tax software for the entire Ukraine. It's called MeDoc. So 90% of the businesses in Ukraine, they use MeDoc. What does this have to do with ransomware or anything? I'm going to put you on hold here, and I'm going to talk more about that soon. We're going to tie this up together. But this family is pretty successful. They're pretty happy about this. There is another company. Ever heard of Maersk? Yeah, you're nodding your head. I'm not going to make you raise your hands. It is not so strange that you know about Maersk, because it is the biggest logistics organization in the world. They ship containers over the water, and they do oil drilling, and they do logistics in every kinds and sorts. They are in 130 countries, and they have 574 different offices in different cities in the world. So they are a fairly big company. June 27 was not the best day in the history of Maersk. They had bad days before, but this was an extremely unique day. Because one day at the office, computers started to crash. They did not just get a ransomware message. Some actually did, but many of them also crashed totally. They stopped working. People were running. The support guys were running in offices trying to disconnect computers from the staff nearby because they saw them one by one getting killed. After a while, the IT staff in Copenhagen, actually there was the most important people were in the UK, they didn't know what to do. Their own workstations that they were supposed to use to fix things from were also crashed. They didn't have any IT power at all. They were totally out of business. Can you imagine that? We later learned that this was the NotPetya virus that had hit Maersk. This was the screen if you were lucky, or you weren't that lucky, but then the OS could actually start. This was the screen that you usually saw, because they encrypted the master boot record on the system, and then they scrambled everything on the disk. They didn't have any intention of making a ransomware virus. They wanted it to look like a ransomware virus. It was a VIPRE virus, or VIPRE malware. They wanted to kill the disks. So this is a shift in the world. This is not very usual. I remember standing on a stage 14 years ago in a fancy place in Stockholm called Burns on an executive seminar, and I was on stage. I was much younger then, 14 years ago, can you imagine? And I had these seniors next to me, and I was a security guy. So this known guy, Patrick Feldström, this Cisco guru inventing the internet together with other people, he was battling with me a little bit, because I said, you know, everything on the internet, we can break it. He said, no. There is encryption on the internet. You encrypt things between Cisco router 1 and 2, so you can't do shit. And I said, yes, I can. I said, okay, if people like you can do it, why hasn't it happened yet? And I said, well, it's because the evil hasn't matured yet. Thinking about it then, looking back, I kind of saw what was coming. Now it's here. It's not here for everyone, but it's definitely here for Maersk. They know that the evil has matured. The threat actor had nothing against Maersk. We're going to get back to that later. It was just an accident that they got hit that bad. But you need to realize one thing. It was irreversibly. They were so corrupted that even the IT staff again were helpless. Maersk is a logistics company. In Copenhagen, in the docks, trucks came in to load containers on the ships. The ships couldn't move, so the entire city was clogged with trucks. There were like kilometers of trucks in line to load that couldn't load, so they had to send them back home. Logistics stopped in the world for some time. Can you imagine that? The impact. Let's move back to Ukraine. So, for the past 4.5 years, Ukraine has been, they actually had an undeclared war with Russia, and this is serious. I mean, more than 10,000 Ukrainians have been killed. millions have lost their homes. It's hard to grasp when you read about it in the papers, right? The Russians has annexed Crimea. I'm not political, I'm not talking about that. I'm just saying this from a cyber perspective. This conflict has involved cyber warfare tricks. Actually, Ukraine has been the #1 playground in the world for cyber attacks. They shut down, they actually took over internet communications companies and that. But what's interesting in this case is that this is related to Maersk. And I'm going to get to that. So, and if you don't believe me, they are pretty aggressive in cyberspace. There are evidence that they've done things in the UK, in the US, in Switzerland, in Malaysia, in Ukraine, Netherlands, other places. I'm going to give you some non-confidential things, just so you realize this is true. This is actually documents from an investigation in the Netherlands. I don't usually show stuff like this, but this is non-confidential, so no one should try to hang me after this. Hopefully, maybe. But this is actually 2 known cyber criminals walking into the Netherlands from the airplane. This is one of the diplomats. And these are UMINT. These are real people working on the ground, not cyber, with stealthy stuff for the GRU. These are their passport, because you have to show your passport when you enter the border, right? So these are the real dudes. I'm outing them right now. They rented a car. And then they went to the compound. That is a big organization, international organization against chemical weapons, because they don't want chemical weapons to be limited in the world. It is funny because evidence showed that they were there. They took photos and things on that compound with themselves in the photos. The rental car was located next to the building when the Netherlands government started to interact with them. In this rental car rented by them, they found this equipment: computers, Wi-Fi antennas, bags with batteries, transformers to use the built-in battery in the car to fix the power, a big Wi-Fi panel antenna hidden under jacket. So they had an entire setup for wireless hacking there. They actually, and the people were there. They had burn phones that was registered in Russia, used a neighbor 1 block away from the GRU office the first time when they were onboarded. They actually took the trash cans out of the hotel room, so they didn't leave any evidence with fingerprints and shit in the rooms. They had a lot of money in cash, so they didn't have to use credit cards. But they weren't that smart all the time. When they were sitting in Marriott, they were actually Googling google.ru for Organization for the Provision of Chemical Weapons. So that's pretty incriminating, I think, after they said, I have no interest in that organization. Especially when you looked into the other dude's bag, because it was full of these different USB things and wireless tricks. Because they were about to hit that building.
They're just IT geeks. Hey, come on. They want to have coverage and battery life. And
it's funny, on the cell, they even had like receipts from the GRU office in taxi receipts in Russia. They should have thrown those away. I think they didn't expect to get caught. They were also in other events around the world, because they had pictures still in the computer, like the Olympic Games and things. You could see a lot of things where they had been surfing. They had been in Switzerland, Malaysia, Russia, all these places. These particular dudes had actually been in, I'm trying to do something very cool here, called Shift Tab, but it didn't work, or Windows Tab, sorry. But they had been in these places where they had been attacked. So this particular dude had been involved in those attacks. Pretty interesting. So, how do we tie this together in the grand finale? Well, the group Sandworm, which is a Russian-sponsored agency or team of hackers, they actually broke into the Linkos update servers where they stored the MediaDoc updates. They created or they implemented implants or Trojans into the updates, and they pushed the updates out to 90% of the organizations in Ukraine. Unfortunately, a dude in Maersk, since Maersk has offices all over the world, he also installed this update. So they had one computer with that software that was Trojanized by Russian agents installed in Maersk, and then it spread using Eternal Blue and other things to the world, or the global world of Maersk network. So what's interesting about this last attack is the last example. Well, it hit 10% of all the organizations in the entire Ukraine. They brought 10% of IT in Ukraine down, and Maersk, and a lot of organizations in other countries. So I think this is a great take-home, and it's also an incentive for you guys to start thinking about whether or not it's worth it to be more proactive and work more with detection of malware. Because it is a difference. We used to do these demos and things just for fun. You could relate to them. It was cool to go to a hacker event and see our cool demos, how we can hack a domain or an enterprise. Now it's actually about survival. Organizations like Maersk and others will be hit again. If you ever had ransomware, there is an 84% chance you will be hit again with ransomware. Because most organizations are not hit once, they're hit twice. And it will not get better next time. Am I cheering you guys up? You look so happy. Well, we are over time. I think some take-homes from this. Dependencies with credentials are still the biggest problem in terms of spreading, lateral movement. The exposure to the internet with phishing and with RDP and vulnerable web servers and things are still the way to get in. Backups are super important. Look at snapshot backups, for sure. And last but not least, start to think about detection. You need to understand when things start to spread, when you have that first intrusion. Now it's a manual attack. Someone will hack you, and 2 days later, they're going to encrypt you. So you actually have a chance if you have advanced detection. We do those services, but I'm not going to try to sell them here. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
This is TechDays.